When President George Washington and his wife Martha finally managed to more or less retire from the public life at their estate in Virginia, most of their time was consumed with making the long-neglected Mount Vernon solvent once more. The general took an active role in the running of his plantation, overseeing the work of the slaves, about 318 at the time working at Mount Vernon, and other workers, and otherwise just went about inspecting his property. And he was doing just that on December the 12th, 1799, in a cold, miserable mixture of snow, sleet, and rain on horseback for several hours. The following day, Washington didn't feel very well, stating he had a sore throat, but he still rode out during a heavy snowfall to mark trees for cutting on his property. He was hoarse upon his return, but made light of it to his wife and secretary. When offered medicine, he shrugged it off, saying, "You know I never take anything for a cold. Let it go as it came." Notably here, his wife had recently recovered from a cold, so presumably he just thought he'd caught the same. By the early morning hours of December the 14th, 1799, Washington was seriously ill. His breathing was significantly impaired, so much so that he could barely speak, but he would not allow his wife to seek help for fear the night air would result in a return of her own sickness. When their maid came to the room at sunrise, she was sent to fetch Mr. Alban Rollins, the estate overseer, who prepared a mixture of butter, molasses, and vinegar and helped the general drink it. The result was the opposite of what they'd hoped. Instead of soothing his throat, attempting to swallow the thick mixture nearly resulted in him suffocating and sent him into convulsions. Next came the mainstay of medicine at the time, bloodletting, of which General Washington was a big fan. Mrs. Washington, not so much, so as her husband was encouraging Rawlings to go for the gusto, the missus was telling him to dial it back. And then the doctor showed up. Dr. James Crake, Washington's personal physician and friend, arrived and, seeing his friend with an inflamed, swollen throat, bled him once more. At the time, it was thought by removing blood from the body, it could potentially take down swelling and reduce inflammation. Dr. Craig also administered another oral medicine comprised of vinegar and sage tea and applied a poultice to Washington's neck and later elsewhere on his body that contained ground-dried beetles. These beetles contain a substance known as cantharidin, which, when it comes into contact with human skin, causes blisters to rapidly form, again trying to balance out the fluids in Washington's body to reduce the inflammation and swelling that was making it difficult for him to breathe. As you may not be surprised at all, none of this worked. Another physician then, Dr. Elisha Dick, arrived at 3 p.m. and, seeing that Washington could still barely breathe, it was decided that they should risk bleeding the general once more. The last doctor to come, Dr. Gustavus Brown, showed up shortly after, and all three agreed to treat the patient rectally with calomel and tartar. After a fourth and final bleeding, and after administering a substance to make Washington vomit with no positive effect, not surprisingly, Washington had had enough. Having 32 ounces of his blood removed over the course of the day, induced blisters on various places on his body, and lack of ability to take in air, his life was slipping away. He told the three physicians, "I feel myself going. I thank you for your attentions, but I pray you take no more troubles about me. Let me go off quietly. I cannot last long." He had his wife bring him the 2 wills he had made, which he read over and had one destroyed. Among other things, he noted in his will that all his slaves, again over 300, should be freed upon his wife's death, and that those who were too elderly or sick to work should continue to be supported by the estate. Further, those who were unable to acquire an education on their own should be provided with tutors to teach them reading, writing, and some useful trade with which they could then support themselves after being freed. On this note, a slave owner since the age of 11, Washington's views on slavery had changed radically over the course of his lifetime. He states, "The unfortunate condition of the persons whose labor and part I employed has been the only unavoidable subject of regret. To make the adults among them as easy and as comfortable in their circumstances as their actual state of ignorance and improvidence would admit, and to lay a foundation to prepare the rising generation for a destiny different from that in which they were born, afforded some satisfaction to my mind, and could not, I hoped, be displeasing to the justice of the Creator." He also instructed Tobias Lear to arrange and record all my late military letters and papers, arrange my accounts, and settle my books, as you know more about them than anyone else, and let Mr. Rawlings finish recording my other letters which he has begun. Washington died at approximately 10 p.m. on Saturday, December the 14th, 1799, at the age of 67. So this brings us back to the original question. Beyond the doctor's well-intentioned but more harmful than good care, what is thought to have killed George Washington? Well, it's believed today that President Washington died of an inflamed epiglottis, the flap near the base of the tongue that keeps food from getting into your windpipe. In extreme cases, swelling of the epiglottis can block the airway sufficiently to cause the person to suffocate. As to what causes the inflammation, this condition is most often the result of Haemophilus influenza type B or strep infection. Whatever the underlying cause, the net result was inability to get sufficient oxygen to support the body. The massive blood loss he sustained in such a short time may have also sent him into hypovolemic shock, resulting in his heart being unable to pump sufficient blood through his body. Combined with the lack of oxygen, this very probably would have resulted in some of his organs ceasing to function. Interestingly, when it became apparent that no safe amount of bloodletting was going to reduce the swelling enough to allow Washington to breathe normally, the second doctor, Elisha Dick, suggested doing a radical new procedure called a tracheotomy to open the airway to allow Washington to breathe, something that likely would have helped tremendously and may have even saved his life in combination with ceasing to bleed him anymore. But the technique was so new, and the patient so illustrious no doubt, that the other doctors argued against it and stuck to tried and true medical treatment like bloodletting, inducing blisters via beetles, and shoving stuff up people's bums, which in less sickly contexts, some might consider all of that just a fun Saturday night.